Okay, I think we're live.
Yes, indeed. Hey, everybody. Very excited to be with you here today, as always. Did we skip a month again? I can't remember. We might have skipped a month.
We skipped
right,
a
Robin?
month.
Yeah.
We skipped the summer
Yeah.
month.
Yeah, we're running and gunning as always, and very excited to be back here today. Unfortunately, if you look around the screen here, where's Ginny? Where did Ginny go? Of course.
Miss Ginny.
Yeah, and hopefully she's going to watch or at least catch up on the recording, I'm sure. Jenny was busy today, couldn't join us, but of course, Robin and I are here as always. And we're very excited here today to have Dr. Serena Huang with us. We're going to be talking about people analytics, which just even defining the term is going to be part of the conversation. But before we get to that, of course, we will all introduce ourselves. So Serena, why don't you get us started?
Sure. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Bill and Robin, thanks so much for hosting. Excited to be here to chat a bit more about people analytics. I'm Dr. Serena Huang, and I'm currently the founder and CEO of Data with Serena. I left my corporate role a few months ago to start my own company. I'm also a LinkedIn learning instructor of pretty soon 3 courses. So excited about the 3rd course coming out in people analytics. Nice meeting you.
Oh, it's awesome. So I'm Robin Hunt, and I'm really excited about this conversation because it's just piqued my interest so much, and so glad to have Serena here to unpack it with us. Be sure in the comments to tell us where you're coming from. We'd love to see where everybody is geographically located, and yeah, I'm pretty pumped about this episode. I am sad that we lost Jenny to another gig. She's hosting somewhere today, and she'll be missed, but I know she'll watch this episode and enjoy it. Bill, tell everybody about you, and then we'll just dive right on in.
All right. Well, yes, I'm Bill Shander. I am also a LinkedIn learning instructor. I can't remember how many courses I have. I think it's 9 or 10 at this point. And working on a new one right now, in fact, which we'll be recording in the fall. Very excited about. But yeah, always fun to be here and unpacking these important data-driven topics. And so, Robin, back to you. You're going to get us started, I think, right?
Yeah, I definitely am. And we're going to dive into people analytics, but I think Serena has a lot to tell us about just herself and her journey and her place here. Welcome to the world of entrepreneurship. It's its own thing. Yes. Okay. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
That's a major accomplishment. And there's a lot of data around that. So
yes, there is. And I feel very proud to also now have a mug.
Yes.
Nice.
You remember the excitement when you make your first merch?
Yeah, your first merch. I love it. I love it. I love that. That's fantastic. I need to pull out my first merch.
Yeah.
My most favorite t-shirt on earth. Yeah,
T-shirts?
I do remember it.
I have little booklets.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have my little whiteboards with my little logo on it. Yeah, it's always
fun. Sander, you're amazing with your merch.
Merch is key. You gotta have it.
That's right. That's funny. Mine was a hackathon t-shirt that I had designed. It had axe handles on it. It was amazing. So maybe we can have an episode on first merch. That would be fun.
I think so. That needs to be a bonus. Yeah.
I like it. So before we dive into people analytics, let's dive into you. And I would love for you to share with our audience today, like, how did you get your start in data? Because I'm just fascinated by it. So why don't you share with us how you actually got your start in data?
Sure. So if you look at my background, my graduate degree is in economics, and it's a very quantitative field in general. And I had the opportunity to be a research assistant in graduate school. So I got to work on cool projects like gender equality that was funded by the US government, like National Science Foundation, National Institute of Health, and so on. So I was working with large data sets on our nation's scientists and engineers and looking at whether or not men and women were paid the same or promoted at the same speed. And I thought that was so fascinating. So I got my hands on data, and that's pretty much how I started. So for those of you who are less familiar with the field, you might have heard things like women earned 80 cents on a dollar that men earned or something like that. And part of my job in that project was to figure out of the 20-cent gap or 20% gap, how much of that was explained by things like women are more concentrated in occupations that in general, on average, pay lower than men. And things like maybe women are more likely to work part-time than men, and that also causes a salary differential or locations and so on. And then the rest could be what we call unexplained wage gap. That could be due to things like discrimination, bias, or something else. So that's how I got started.
That is so, from a data professional perspective, like you said, something so valuable there. Like we hear wage gap, and sometimes we think there's only one explanation.
Right.
And what you just unpacked there for everybody is that there are a multitude of explanations for every type of gap, whether it be gender equality or whatever. If there is a gap, there's multiple explanations. Like we should probably do an episode on gap analysis and talking about those things. What was something that you learned in that shocked you? Like not necessarily about the study itself, but about data. Anything in there that just was groundbreaking for you as a professional?
Gosh, I think how much work goes into cleaning the data shocked me. And this is even under best case scenarios where we're working with people in very similar jobs, right, in the same country, in the same language. The data was captured in English and so on. And even then, it was still a mess. Right? I probably spent 80 to 90% of my time cleaning the data before I could do any analysis of the gap. So things like removing outliers, looking at data that didn't make sense, and so on. Looking at timeframes, make sure they line up correctly, so you're not, comparing 1985 wage to 2023 wages. Using the right inflation numbers and so on. I mean, there's a lot that goes into a simple analysis that gets you the 20% wage gap. So that definitely shocked me. And gosh, little did I know I was having a blast at the time. That was the cleanest data I would ever work with. It really went downhill after that.
Yeah, that's funny. That's funny. Yeah, I know we say all the time, like cleaning is a major effort. It represents only a small portion of the domain knowledge, but it's a major part of the job. Like,
yes.
So yeah, I'm glad you learned that on your first one. And then I think you went on to then work in other areas where the data got uglier.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. It's good though. I think, I'm always fascinated at when people start out this journey that they believe that the data is going to be, perfectly curated for them to be able to study. And it's like, I've never had that experience. The researchers who work with our team, they have that experience because we're taking on that data cleaning effort for them and then passing that data to them.
Great.
Which is great for them. Yeah, they love it. But like they're the only people on earth that I know of who have that clean data hand delivered to them. The rest of us are having to be in it and cleaning it up.
Yeah, in the gift
and yet
box.
somehow executives always think that they have the cleanest data in the world and that all questions can be answered with data.
Right.
How is that true? How is that true? How is that possible?
Yeah, good. Right. Yeah, we should do a gap analysis on
I
the proofs
think
of
so.
that. Yeah.
I think a simple poll of like, what percentage of you think your data is clean, and it will be very telling to see the level difference. I bet as more senior the person becomes, the more optimistic they might.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because in their because what they are seeing is clean.
Right. Yeah,
that's true.
Beautiful dashboards, the PDF files.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. That would be fascinating. You would have to survey the entire population of the organization to really get a full view of what that actually actually
Right.
looks like. But yeah,
Right.
that's fascinating. That's fascinating. So tell us, like, at what point you realized that data was your thing. Like, you knew that
Mm,
this type of data was your thing. Like,
I,
this
I,
is
I
where
would
I'm going to spend
say,
my time.
yeah, first job out of grad school. So I was a litigation consultant. I spent a few years in consulting, and my first job was working on labor and employment litigation as a economist slash data analyst slash a lot of other things. And things that I just described, for example, like the wage inequality issue, I would be analyzing them in very high stakes situations like a class action lawsuit, right? Where a Fortune 500 company gets sued and said, there's a lot of women who said they were paid unfairly and so on. So I will come in and look at their data, and quantify, again, what percentage of that was, explained by other things versus what is unexplained and so on. And I realized that it was something I enjoyed doing because I was always very curious and I would dig deeper. And yeah, and I realized I really I enjoyed it and I was good at it. So it was definitely tedious in terms of data cleaning and all of that. And this is when I realized I was lucky in graduate school to work with clean data sets, because, coming from HR systems and Fortune 500 across multiple years, there's a lot of cleaning to be done. And um, yeah, and I think part of that was also about the impact that I could make in just seeing it come to life in real time. Very quickly, the client will get an answer on what they need to do, and where there were potential problems. So it wasn't always for lawsuits. Sometimes they were annual audits, and companies just wanting to know, do we have a problem or not? Tell us how to fix it. I really enjoy those as well, and finding out where there are lots of unexplained gaps in promotion and pay, and making recommendation on how to bring them up to parity. So yeah, so that's how I realized this was my thing, and it wasn't just all data; it was really people focused data.
Yeah, yeah. So I know we talked earlier, and I was like, oh, so data's your thing, but then how did you get into people analytics? Like, because again, it's and you'll define it for us, but it's sort of a niche. But like, how did what Bill and I both landed into our data professions years ago before there was a thing called a data professional, right?
Yeah.
We kind of accidentally landed here. So, but then once we landed, we've stuck with it and mastered it and tried. Well, I would never say mastered it, but we've tried to attempt to master it and educate people about it. But how about you and people analytics? Like, how did you land into that?
Yeah, I think like you in the sense that I got into people analytics when it wasn't really a thing. But I was intentional about the rebranding. So after about 4 years in consulting, I got a call from a recruiter saying they were standing up something called HR analytics. And this was at GE. So, very large company. I've never been a non-consultant before. And I thought HR and analytics were not words that went together at the time. But I was curious. And I also said, I have no HR experience. This can't possibly be right. You call the wrong person. And I said, no, no, no. We wanted someone who know how to deal with data, who know the statistics, who can model, and have passion for people. And I thought, oh, okay, this could work. So essentially, it was looking at supply and demand for workers, employees within a company. And I thought, as a economist by trade, instead of looking at supply and demand for labor externally, I'm just looking at it within a company. Sure, no problem. So I figured at the time that I would probably just go back to consulting after a couple of years of in-house work, and I never looked back. And then within a few months of me taking that job, again, that was called HR analytics at the time, there was a Forbes article that came out. It said the geeks have arrived in HR. People analytics is here. This was, I think, 2015-ish. So many years ago, this, little analyst me, first job outside of consulting in Fortune 10, I walked into our head of HR's office and I said, I want to rebrand my COE as people analytics. And then he looked at me like, your COE? So you and your intern? And I said, yes, me and my intern. Thank you very much. Do you mind? And it's like, knock yourself out. I don't care. So I successfully rebranded that to People Analytics, and was the first across GE businesses at the time to call ourselves People Analytics instead of either HR Analytics or Workforce Analytics. So I went on a tour and everything internally, and it's like, we are now People Analytics. This is what we do, and it was really exciting times. And I just, I could feel people's excitement as well, because they were old. They were like, oh, the old stuff was so boring, and even though it's rebranding, I did pick up new things, like we want to look at how to predict performance a little bit better. We want to look at predicting quality of hire, and so looking at diversity and inclusion and so on. And so I did expand beyond the original scope of the role that they hired me for, and my little intern at the time and myself, we were excited, and I never looked back.
That's awesome.
What's
Go ahead, Bill.
Sorry, I was just going to say one important thing, which is, we've talked a lot in this series about how to get into this job, what, how to train, how to educate yourself, et cetera. And what's one thing we've never said before, but I think it's really key here, which, Serena's bringing to the table, is economics. We've never talked about that being a pathway into data work. And yet it is one of the best ways, because it's true. I mean, I had a couple of roommates in college who were economics majors. And I remember at the time being like, economics, like, why do you want to go into like economics? Like, what does that even mean? Money. I don't even get what the point, like, what is economics? And in retrospect, and I went to a school that had a good economics department, I should have majored in economics, because it's a way of thinking about, as you said, it's supply demand. It's numerical, quantitative things which have impact in our lives. And it's not just money, it's broader than that. And the way you think as an economist is the way that we all need to think when we're data workers. So I think it's just sort of worth pointing that out. It's a great great model to follow.
Definitely. And I am slightly biased because all three of my degrees here on the wall are in economics. And I mentored a lot of people who are debating which field to go into. The reason I was attracted to it initially was because of the flexibility. I knew that unlike other PhDs where you have to teach and become a professor, economics is not one of those degrees where you have the flexibility of going to the private sector, which I did, work for the government, work for a think tank, NGO, what have you. The options are really limitless, and you get trained in a very unique way of thinking, which make me a natural skeptic that people don't always love, but but it's great for data analytics work.
Oh, I 100% agree. And I think we should probably address that in almost every episode, is that's a potential route. I know we have economists on our research team, and like we can't wait to see what the economists are going to say.
Right.
It's like, we've done all this data, we've done all this research, all the statisticians have come in there, and it's like, now it's time for the economists to talk. Like,
oh my gosh.
Going to say, because they do, Bill's right. And you know this as well, like the way they see things, and what they can do with that information to show a picture is pretty phenomenal. I actually thought Bill was going to say something different, so I'm going to add that to the party. And being courageous and being brave is really hard to do in a large corporate environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to applaud you for being brave and courageous and going, I want to rebrand this as people analytics. They had no idea what they had at that moment when you made that brave, courageous step. And I think it can be hard to be in that large. I mean, I've been in large corporate environments. I worked in them. I know how difficult it is when, you know, especially if you're a 2-person team and one of you is an intern.
Right.
That was a very brave step. So I applaud that
Thank you.
courageousness. And I think it's encouraging for, you know, our future workforce to understand sometimes when you feel something in your gut, obviously you knew that in your gut, right?
Yeah.
So when you feel something like that in your gut, you know, they could have shot you down and said no.
Right.
But they said, we don't care, which is, you know, which they may not have, like, whatever, do whatever you want to do. But it still worked out well.
Yes,
So
definitely.
I love that. I just absolutely.
And I think being a woman in a male-dominated field as well, it makes it even more challenging at times. So I purposely made courage one of my words last year. So every January 1st, I announced the words kind of my North Stars or anchors for the year. And courage was my 2021 one of the words. And I started sharing more courageous conversations on LinkedIn, including tough topics like diversity and inclusion, including topics like mental health at work. And people always say, oh, that's very courageous. I'm like, I'm trying to spark courageous conversations on purpose. I'm, because I think they're important and it needs to be said, and not necessarily by me, but from other people who are able to share their experience and just have dialogues. So I think courage is, courage has been with me from time to time. And
awesome.
Other times I look at it and say, oh my God, I would never do that again. What was I thinking?
Yeah. Well, but it works. And again, I just think it's important to note that sometimes in order to do something groundbreaking or push a ball forward or just move the needle in the right direction, you know, there's a certain amount of courageousness that has to occur. And audacity to do it. Right. So, and I understand I've only ever worked in male dominated professions, and I grew up with brothers. So I had no recognition of it. But to me, it looked like life. You know, I mean, I'm so serious. Like, I don't know. I'd been in the technical trade for I don't know how long, and I looked around and somebody cited some type of stat about the percentage of women in tech, and it was like all of a sudden it dawned on me, wait, there really isn't. Yeah. So good for you for being a groundbreaker and courageous. All right. So I struggled with the idea of people analytics in the sense of trying to just like, what is it? Like, am I doing it? Am I not doing it? And so I think we probably need to define it. So I'm going to give you my terrible definition of it that you have since corrected, but I want you to unpack it for our audience. I kind of struggle with this. Is it just data analytics that involves people? Because I study people for a program. And in my mind, we're doing program evaluation, but we're using people as part of the metrics for that program evaluation. And so, you know, is that people analytics or is it not? So I think we'll let you as the expert tell us, what is people analytics? What does that really mean?
Sure. Yeah. Well, before that, Bill, do you want to share your definition of people analytics?
Mine is pretty much identical to Robin's, or it was. I assumed it was just data analytics with people stuff, you know, based on people's information. And I know it's generally thought of as being in an organization, in a work environment. But not really knowing, like, is there a special thing happening over here with this? Is it different from other analytics work, or is it just sort of the context, et cetera, et cetera?
Absolutely. And the organization piece is really important. So generally, I would say people analytics is using data analytics to solve people problems. That's it. No buzzwords.
No
um,
buzzwords.
Yes. So using
Buzzword
data
free.
analytics to solve people problems. So what are people problems? Well, people problems, you can think about how to hire better, how to retain better, how to select the next leader better, how to make sure you have the right skill sets for the future. How do you make sure you are opening the new R&D center in the right place because of local talent being abundant, right? Those are all examples of people problems that you can solve with data analytics.
And so it brings up an important point, which you already said earlier. The geeks arrived at one point.
Yes.
And prior to that, we were making decisions like hiring being the easiest example.
Yep.
Well, we hire the people we like when we interview them, right? We hire
Right.
the people who look like us when we interview them,
Yep.
et cetera, et cetera. And so, all right, we're going to apply data to this now. And I think an important part of the conversation, of course, is going to be you telling us how you do that. Like what are those things that become these data points that inform these decisions in a way that goes beyond using our gut or
Yeah.
whether we like someone or not.
Right. Yeah, hiring is a great example, and I like that a lot because I tell people hiring as a manager or leader of a large organization is the most expensive thing you will do. Absolutely the most expensive thing. If you hire the right person, it's going to be amazing, right? If you hire the wrong person, think about the cost of not only trying to get them better in the first place, give them another shot, get them some mentors and what have you. If it doesn't work out, you have to let them go. And then the burden on the rest of the team and the morale problem throughout the process it's pretty expensive. So how do we get hiring right? A lot of companies have started to think about this concept of quality of hire. How do I know I've hired the right person? How do I know I've hired a great person versus a good person versus an okay person? Well, you can think about, things like down the line, what is their performance rating, right? So maybe not day one, whether or not you hire the right person, but in a few months, when you have a mid-year or year-end review, you might know the new hires that are in your top 10% versus the ones that are in the bottom. And so you can use that as an example, or potentially look longer term, right? Who are more likely to get promoted faster? Those should be indications of some sort of differential in terms of performance and, of course, other things as well. So think about how do you measure quality of hire. You can also think about, retention, for example. Now, obviously, not everyone stays is excellent. So but you can use that as a signal as well. Or if you have hired, they're all managers. How are they managing their team? Do you have upward feedback or 360 feedback that tells you whether or not they're a good leader or a terrible leader or somewhere in between? So those are all performance related metrics on the individuals that you have hired. Then you can work backwards and say, hey, let's validate our hypothesis, right? I like to use the kind of hypothesis language a lot because most people can resonate and they can think back to their science class at some point, even though this is people problems. Say, okay, my hypothesis is that people who went to great schools do better. People who went to my competitors or top companies, however that's ranked, are better. People who went to local schools and come work here stay longer, right? Whatever the hypothesis is, connect the dots and then see if it's true, right? Maybe it's as simple as are referrals better than job boards, right? Or if you want to look at your recruiters, which ones are doing a great job? This could become kind of contentious, so be careful because sometimes it's out of the recruiter's control. But right, like imagine which recruiter recruits the best talent. If they're all going after similar professionals, then you can sort of trace back to who made the first call. And those people seem to be excellent. So there must be something with maybe the initial screening questions this person has was great. And so sort of making the hypothesis and testing it with data.
Now, what's interesting, I'm sorry, Robin, just a slight follow-up, which is this, that, HR is notoriously underfunded, underappreciated. It's always like HR trying to influence executives, company-wide decisions. It's always hard. But in order to do what you're describing, HR and specifically the people analytics people have to say, well, for us to do this properly, you're going to need to track things like these performance metrics and all these other these bits of data, and do it in a methodical way so the data is clean, et cetera. And so, in your experience, have you been able to convince your bosses, and or do you see in the industry wide HR being able to affect these changes so data is being collected so that these analytics can be done properly in order to do a better job hiring, retaining, et cetera?
Ooh, that's a difficult one. Yes, in some cases, for sure. Not all. It's definitely hard to explain, even I don't think it's just HR specifically, in many other fields too, where the cleanness of data or the quality of data is sort of an afterthought. And it's not until you use it and realize there's a problem often when you decide, okay, this needs to be cleaned up. So yeah, some of those metrics I described earlier are not even gathered in some organizations, whether it's performance or the channel of people coming through on hiring, right? That data is not always collected, and you have to set up a system in the right way to even collect those. And so that's why I go back to the hypothesis, right? It's not just about the hypothesis. It's more importantly, what are you going to do with that information once you have it? Well, so then you make the argument so that you can get the investments like cleaning up data or, getting better systems by saying, well, wrong hires are very expensive. This is how much it's cost us. By having to let go X number of poor hires, it's cost us millions of dollars. If we have a better way, because we know which schools, which university, which former employers, or which kind of training, or which type of channel, or which recruiter, name it. If we know that produces the best candidates, let's target there instead of spreading our efforts everywhere. That will save us money, at the front, and also get better employees. Then translate those into dollars. That's how I've been able to really argue for more funding in most cases. It's like, it doesn't matter. And it's not because I'm an economist, but money talks, right? Money talks everywhere. And the reason sometimes people analytics teams don't get the funding is because they can't talk money. So,
right.
If you're doing something interesting that has impact of $5 instead of 5 million, guess what? That project from another department that's worth 5 million is going to get the funding. So
interesting, because you were like, and I don't just feel that way because I'm an economist, and in my brain I was going, here comes the economist. Like, because I heard it. Yeah. So to be fair, like you probably do see things through that economic lens, which thank you for that. That's what we need. My brain has exploded with all of these thoughts and ideas, and I try to jot down so many of these. First of all, I think you need to create some more merch that says geeks have arrived at HR, just with data.
Wait, you didn't see
someone else coined that phrase.
You didn't see the back of my mug.
Keep calm.
Keep calm.
Brain data. Love that.
That's good.
Love that. I would have a feeling that some HR groups are scared of you because of the status quo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And which is okay if you're nailing it, right? Like if your HR team is like, you have found the talent pool in your area that you need to pull from, and you're staffing and you're amazing, like, fine, be scared of Data with Serena. However, if you're the struggle bus, like, I would say if you're that person who immediately you're fearful of people analytics, you might need to get over it and embrace it. I mean, I'm just thinking of all these areas too. Like we talk a lot in our community here that we don't have the talent pool. And I'm like, we do have it. Like I
We
see
do,
it.
yeah.
I'm working with these people like you.
Yes.
Like, well, you know, we don't have enough diversity in our hires because we don't have enough diverse talent. I'm like, you're wrong. I'm with them. They are, you know. So I feel like, you know, how do you get people? Do you face people who are scared of you? And how do you help a team who might be a little bit fearful for what, you know, people don't like to see their data because you're, you know, I was about
you
to say
might,
I won't say because it's terrible, but you know, you're about to show the truth.
Yes.
Yeah. And that scares people when you show the truth. So how do you help a team get over that?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point. And sometimes people don't want to know the truth, right? And they're scared of what the truth will tell them. So I think this is why I would say stakeholder management is one of the key skills for a people analytics team, especially the leader to be successful, because you have to know the different stakeholders, right? They have different agenda, if you will. You know, how the CFO thinks versus what the CHRO need to optimize are completely different things. Yes, they sit next to each other, but how they're judged on their performance is totally different, and that's why they think differently. So, you know, so as simple as like, are people assets or cost? Right. You know, I think they need to be classified as assets, if you ask me, but a lot of times people think of them only as a cost item on the P&L. And that's something to be minimized as opposed to something to invest in. So that's a very different philosophy, right? Even upfront. So I use that as extreme example a bit, but it does happen at the top of the house, right? Your most senior stakeholders might think of people very differently, and that impacts how you talk to them. So you got to learn your stakeholders early on and see what language will resonate and what they actually care about. Is it cost minimization? Is it engagement of employees? Is it retention? Is it just, gosh, I can't stand the systems. I want my life to be easier. I don't want to look at spreadsheets. Whatever that is, if you don't know what they are, it could be really difficult. In terms of fear, I think the fear about not wanting to find out the truth. Let's take diversity, for example, since we're going there. Anyways, that's, by the way, my next course is on diversity, inclusion, and employee well-being using data analytics.
Love it.
So, yeah. And so diversity, inclusion, for example, can be very sensitive topic, right? Everyone has opinion, and a lot of people are screaming, we can't find diverse candidates, or we can't find qualified diverse candidates, and what have you. And so when you look within the company, and you look at the data, right, on, you know, how are we promoting people? What is the process? How do we look at most senior leadership, and who's going to go into those roles potentially? And if you suddenly discover that diversity is an issue, and in a particular area, for whatever reason, you have no women who are ready to be promoted to, you know, senior leadership roles, suddenly you have a problem that maybe you weren't ready to see. So I try to prep the stakeholders in advance and say, here are some possible outcomes. Here are possible things we will discover with the data, and making sure, one, not just that they're ready to see it, but also they're ready to take action, right? Most importantly, what I don't want for my team as a leader is waste their time, because economists don't like waste their time doing any analysis that result in zero actions and zero decisions and no change. That is the worst in my books. And imagine how your junior analysts feel after spending hours cleaning the data, after the hours of doing the analysis, making the presentation, and then the leader goes, meh, okay, good to know. So it's getting that commitment to action upfront, and that's, again, I think, hard to do if you are not even solving the right problem. So sort of work backwards a bit, get to know your stakeholders, build those relationships, and get to know what problem you're solving for, and then make sure they're ready to commit to action, whatever the data shows. It can be beautiful, it can be ugly.
So I yeah, I'll just throw this out here, and then Bill, I'll shut up. So I think also it's fair to say, Serena, if you show up to the party, you're, over a decade in, you have a decorated background, plenty of experience. People are going to listen to you. If you are the intern and you've just uncovered all the company's problems,
Yeah.
nobody's listening to you. And that's an unfortunate thing.
Yeah.
But remember the courage from earlier.
Yeah.
Identifying the leader to take that message to the party of all the other leaders might be your next best step. Bill, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. That's a great point. The other thing I was going to say, just in terms of fear, there's the other side of the table, right? Like the person applying for jobs, right? We've all had the experience, or we've read about the experience if we haven't directly done it. You send in a resume, some AI or some process is filtering you out based on the data before you even have a chance to make a phone call. So everybody on that side of the table is very afraid of people analytics because data is going to determine whether I get a job. It's like, all right, well, I didn't go to the right school.
Right.
I'm not the right profile for whatever reason, et cetera, times 10. But I'm a really smart person. I know I'm going to kick ass no matter what job I go for. But the data is going to prohibit me. And so, I don't know if that's something you need to address in your role as a people analytics person. We're thinking about the other side of the table as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I think you brought up a great point. Is that's why you're hearing organizations going with skills first approach now with recruiting. What does that mean? Well, that means I don't care where you went to school. If you can show to me that you know this particular skill, like Python, you know how to code very well, then I don't care that you didn't go to MIT or other schools, but you can do the job. So it's sort of shifting away from assuming, because we use education as a signal, right? We assume that someone who went to the 4-year college, a grade school in particular, know how to do certain things. That may or may not be true. I don't know if you guys saw that recently. There was a few consulting firms starting to invest in training of their new hires because they don't have the right skills, despite having 4-year degrees. So going back to a skill-based or skill-first strategy, you're now focusing, instead of assuming credentials mean X, Y, and Z, you're saying, I want to know either through assessments or either through other credentials, and that someone has the skills to do that particular job instead.
This is so important. I'm going to share a personal story. This is early in my career. I worked for a national franchise, and I was doing education in my domain, which eventually would be data. And I got recruited out of there multiple times to go work in corporate environments. And then the third time I was recruited, it was, I'll just say healthcare industry. I'll just leave it at that. And they came in, they were like, we need you. We want you. We see what you've done here at these other places. Like, we need you to come in and interview. We need you to come in and interview. And I'm like, I'm not really interested in leaving where I'm at. I'm kind of happy. They're like, really need you. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll do this, got in to do the interview. Now, again, they asked me to come in and do the interview. I brought my paperwork, my resume, and they set me out in the little interview room. And they said, we'll come and get you in a minute. And it's like, okay, great. And I'm like, you're nervous when you're going to do a job interview. Okay, I don't care how old you are, how good you are. It's nerve-wracking when someone's about to assess you and make a decision on you. And they came in. I got introduced with one person of a certain level of seniority. And then all of a sudden I sat out there for like 30, 45 minutes. And then they sent somebody else out. Basically, they sent the intern to tell me that they were really sorry that I didn't meet their qualifications, and they refused to interview me.
Wow.
Oh, brutal.
Devastated. How is that possible?
Devastated. Hurt me so bad as a person. I can't even describe it.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, you called me here.
Yeah.
but we weren't in that skills based. We weren't
Right.
in that, and we're there now. So I'm like personally thrilled over that. Of course, you know, hey, I'm glad they didn't bring me on because my life would be totally different. And I like my life. So everything that I've had to deal with has had a greater purpose, and I'm okay with it. But I do remember being devastated by that. I think it makes me have compassion for other people when they don't have that decorated, you know, but they're definitely skilled workers. And I get so frustrated when people say we don't have the people. It's like, well, if you don't have the people, it's because you're not looking. They're here. I see them. So
Right.
yeah. No, I think that fear on both sides is actually very, very good and definitely worth unpacking. What are some of the commonalities? Okay, go ahead, Bill.
No, good. That's fine.
I was going to say, like, I just wonder, like, in your experience, have you seen, is everybody's problem different? And are there common problems across, you know, organizations?
Yeah.
Are there common things we see, or is it always very individualized?
Definitely from one industry to another, there are different problems. Because, you know, some companies in a particular industry might be going through huge growth versus the ones that are sort of stable. Then you don't have to hire as much if you're stable. But I would say hiring right is always a problem. Hiring fast, hiring right is always a problem. And then retention, like retaining the right people and then creating programs internally that will actually keep people. That's really difficult as well. Yeah, and I recently shared on LinkedIn this interesting phenomenon that I thought was like something was wrong with the data the first time I saw it. But a lot of people from other companies have said they've seen the same thing. Is that for these programs sometimes a company will identify high potential employees, right? They are the future superstars, if you will. So these hypo programs are then given things like special coaching, special training, special leadership development opportunities because that they handpicked or assess, however you get there, special people. And what happens in some organizations, in the data I've seen, is that these people, upon graduation or finishing the program, pretty instantly resign and they go somewhere else. And so you just invested 6 months to a year, sometimes 2 years, in your future VP, for example, of whatever, and then they're quitting after thousands of dollars spent per person. So I thought, okay, something must have gone wrong with the data. I looked and checked and checked and checked. Nope, nothing was wrong with the data. So what happened was like, all right, so usually those are small, like here's another problem with people analytics is something like that. Usually you have very small samples. You're not going to have hundreds of people in the hypo program, right? You might have a handful at the most senior part, maybe 20 in the next layer down, and so on. So I decided to, do a small focus group and talk to a few people in real life and just say, hey, what happened? Tell me, did you not like the program? And then so some themes emerged that make me at least feel good about the data not being wrong. So one of them said, I was so busy as a hypo that I got so many projects in my own department and I had to do cross-functional things. And then for this program, I have to do additional work on myself.
Yeah.
Oh man, I was tired, but it gave me a few hours away from work. I finally slowed down and I realized I really don't like this. So the program accidentally, unintentionally created a space for them to think about things that they didn't have time to think about. So that was one. And then another theme that was very common was like this program just added more work to my already really busy life. And again, right, in a lot of organizations, the reward that you get for being productive, for being a superstar is more work, right? Yes, you eventually get promoted, hopefully. But in the meantime, you got to endure more and more work. And that's how you know you're doing well, which is somewhat messed up, but but the truth, right? And so anyhow, so I thought, oh, maybe just like this one or two organizations I've been in, but a lot of other companies, their people analytics team have told me that we see the same thing, that these. So then, Rob, I'm curious, from your program evaluation hat, does that mean the hypo program has failed, or does it mean something else?
It might mean it's housed in the wrong place.
Okay.
Maybe it should be housed in the high performing people before they go into an organization of choice. I also, for all the early entrepreneurs out there, those long in the game and who haven't gone as far as they want to, a long time ago, and I'll see if I can find this study. I read a study where you can take a high performing person who's a high performer in one situation and move them, and then they're no longer high performing. So here's the other thing. Just because you're high performing in one set of situation and context does not make you a high performer in another situation or context. So I would say for program evaluation is like that program was maybe in the wrong place, or it had this outcome. Its outcome obviously did not match what it was intended to do. So
Or to your point, you need to factor in those retention considerations as part of the program. It's funny, I've actually done a fair amount of work with hypo programs, training for hypo programs. And I was working on a keynote address about it. So I read a stack of research this thick about hypo, about boomerang employees, about all kinds of things. And so this was a large sample, one of the studies that I read, and it's a very common problem. These people get recruited away, or to your point, they get burnt out. There's 100 things that go wrong. And there's a lot of questions now around hypo programs as a concept. Like, do these things even work? But I think the big issue is, so phase one is, hey, let's create a program for high potential employees and let's train them and do all this stuff. We need to get to phase two, right? Phase two, where with our data, we now know what these problems are. Now let's work on retention. Let's work on not burning them out and all these other things we can learn from the data. So it's probably a great example of the power of people analytics to take a fairly refined, focused thing and make it better. Because I think the next generation of hypo programs have to be a success. Right.
Yeah, and it could be the selection problem as well. Maybe, who knows, maybe the wrong people were selected in the first place. So there's a lot of things that could be said.
I want to talk about that. I want to talk about that, again, because I think, and I'll go find this research and at least I'll share it among us. I told my son this the other day. I work as hard today for myself as I ever worked for any of my employers. Like, that's my work ethic. My kids are, they're going into the workforce, right? So I'm like trying to give them all this, what they'll listen to. So I'm like, my work ethic is not related to what I got paid. My work ethic is my work ethic. But am I a high performer? Well, yeah, in the things I want to high perform in, I am. So I think if I were to want to have a discussion about high performers, I would think we should take everybody at the entry level and prepare them to be high performers. Like, quit trying to find a high performer and stick them in.
Right.
Why don't you grow a high performing group? Like, I am for growing them at the beginning into being high performers. And then if they go and high perform somewhere else, and I had a part of that, awesome sauce. But I think it's that entry point into hypo programs that maybe they're starting too late. Maybe they should start earlier. But I don't know.
It's funny. I have a friend who's working on education reform, and he worked with Duke University, and they did a study where they took a bunch of kids in elementary schools in, I think it was Virginia, wherever it was. And they took all of these kids, I think there was like preschool or like certainly lower elementary school kids. And they treated every one of those kids as a gifted student. So all the things they used to only do in the gifted class, they did for all of these students, and performance like skyrocketed. So to your point, treat everyone like that, train everyone as though they are that, and you're going to get a higher percentage of people who actually perform well.
Yeah. Right.
by
It's
that
like
study.
a placebo effect of some sort, right?
Yeah, maybe.
Fascinating. Okay, so we're getting close to our time here, and there's just a couple of things I would love to run through with you for our audience. Again, most of our audience are people early in their data careers or somewhere in their data journey. And I would say, what are some of the skills that you believe someone who's interested in really working in people analytics, what are some things that you would encourage them to start with or to grow into skill wise?
Yeah. Yeah. Skill wise, I'll talk about technical and business skills separate. So for technical, certainly you want to know things like SQL and Python, and I mean I think Excel everyone should know. So not that it's not important, but I would say the SQL and Python will set you apart for the data wrangling and predictions and machine learning models and so on. For visualization, either Tableau or Power BI depends on where you're going, and then I think maybe just like stay flexible. So when I was going to school, I did not have any of these tools available. So none of the professors taught me. So I had to learn them on my own. And but once you know kind of one programming language, it's fairly easy. And then Alteryx potentially as a bonus. I learned that in like one afternoon or something because I had to. And it's a super cool tool. Lots of
I just
pressure.
learned that in one afternoon.
Yeah,
I just
no,
learned
I
that
was
in one afternoon. That's amazing.
did not become an expert, but I had to do it.
Yeah.
And so so sort of be prepared to learn on the job as well, and just continue to teach yourself. And then on business skills, I don't like the word soft skills. Business skills, things like communication definitely is really important, and especially, and I noticed that was one of the strengths from the feedback I got early on, was I was able to articulate really complex and technical details to non-technical audience without making them feel stupid. Right? This last part is very important.
That's the key.
So for those of you who have done any consulting before, a client will not buy from you if they feel like you're putting them down. So it doesn't matter. Like I tell my junior data scientists all the time on the team before, like, you have proven to me that you are very smart. You don't need to prove that to our clients.
Right.
So yeah, no,
no.
yeah. So that communication, super important. And then I've mentioned stakeholder management already. The other pieces are like change management, I would say, is there are lots of courses on change management. I would even recommend anyone working data analytics to just pick it up and take a short course to get better. Why? Because hopefully your data analytics so good that it's going to result in some change.
That's
and
awesome.
People, the only thing I've learned about people, not psychologists, is people hate change. Everyone hates change. So your change management skills will come into good use no matter what domain, people or non-people kind of data analytics, so that your stakeholders are prepared to make changes so that your analysis has not gone to waste. I'll pause there for the skills.
That is change management. What a great recommendation. And Bill, I'm going back in my mind here. I don't think we've ever talked about change management at all. I think that is an excellent observation. And yes, people do not like change. And as a data professional, that's what we're all about. Like, we're measuring to see if something should change, and then we're making recommendations on it changing. So that's
and it may be incremental change or maybe revolutionary change, and either way, that's going to be a process.
Yeah, incremental change people can sometimes digest more than just they don't, and we're all the same. None of us really love it. It's just some of us go with it when we have to. Yeah. This has been such an excellent experience for me. Like, I've learned a lot. Bill, feel like you've learned a lot in this one? Yeah, this is so great. Yeah, thank you so much.
I also want to point out one little thing before we go, which is, I think, and this is anecdotal, this is not data driven, This might be the most international audience we've ever had. The number of countries listed by the commenters, I don't think I remember seeing quite so many
That's
different
awesome.
countries.
Amazing.
So,
We could probably study that.
I
Yeah,
think someone
we
can
should
make a
track that.
chart.
Yeah, we can make
Yeah.
we can visualize that a lot.
Yeah.
we need to capture that data.
We know
Yes,
we should do that.
Yes.
So we would love to have you back again. Thank you so much for just giving us all this really good information about people analytics and just being candid. It's been awesome.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are so welcome. I'm sure we'll continue this conversation.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll see you next time, folks. Thanks for joining us today. Again, really super good information here, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.